Hey everybody, this is Lonnie Sweet from the Sweet Management Group, and you are either listening to or watching the Never Sell Ice to Eskimos podcast, where we talk to sales executives from the culinary, sports, general business, and entertainment worlds about their journey, about being a salesperson in this industry and what it took to get to where they are today. So whether you're listening in your earbuds, you're sitting in front of your computer, I appreciate you stopping by and hope you enjoy. Hey everybody, this is Lonnie Sweet, CEO of Sweet Management Group, formerly the Connect Group, and this is the Never Sell Ice to Eskimos podcast. A little bit of a different background right now because power was out in my office. I'm sitting on my third floor and I'm blurred out because I don't want you to see what the hell's behind me. I am excited today because I've got another old friend of mine, and I say old, but again, she's not old and I'm not old, but we go way back. Courtney Carter, really way back, right? Courtney is the founder and CEO of Carter Media Group. She also founded a charity called Allied to Action. She's got a bunch of angel projects. She's also one of the owners in the LA women's soccer team. And she's just cool as shit, I mean, to be more than honest with you, right? So Courtney and I go way back to when she was working on Soccer United marketing years ago. And now she's doing some really amazing things. So Courtney, thank you for being here. And as I was saying before, it really is great to see you.
Lonnie, you are a legend. That was an amazing introduction. Thank you very much. Hopefully I can live up to it in the conversation, but it's funny. I was thinking about it today, knowing we were going to be doing this. I was like, when did Lonnie and I first meet? I think I remembered it. I need you to tell me if I'm right here. I think it was at the Starbucks around the corner from the office, from the Soccer United marketing offices on like 37th and Lex or something like that. Like it was like a corner Starbucks by the New York Sports Club, I think. And I think we sat at the window, and I just remember I forget exactly what you were pitching me or talking to me about.
I was selling you something, I'm sure.
You were selling me something for sure, but definitely not ice.
Perfect segue into this, right?
Yeah. And I just was like, I like this guy. I really like this guy. I will say this is when I think you just had your first child. So this was 14 years ago.
So I think God, you caught me actually at the end, at the back end of my talent side. So I think I was working at a company called MSL, which I was there for like a year and a half, or I was there for a short period of time. It was after SFX, it was after IMG. I went to MSL. We at the time were creating a football property, but I think we were trying to do something similar in some. And the guy that I was working for at the time, I think tried to pitch Kathy, and we got pitched thrown down to you, and they were like, "Lonnie, go meet with Courtney and figure out what you could do." And listen, I think it's a really good segue into this conversation because, and I was talking about this with Renee Anderson on another podcast as well. She's amazing.
She's the best,
right? She's
so great,
like amazing.
Yeah.
Renee and I go back to 20 years ago when she was working in the Arena Football League and I was at SFX. I was an intern, and we shared an office space. And so what I think is really interesting when I think about sales and when I think about relationship building, being able to maintain relationships over an elongated period of time, because you never really know, right? Like you never really know where a Starbucks coffee, when I was selling something, I wasn't selling something, but we had a chance meeting, right? I clearly didn't close the deal with you, but we had a chance meeting, and our relationship has been over the last 15 years, almost just like this. Hey, I'm coming to LA. You want to grab, lunch? Right. Or you're working at ESPN. Like, hey, let's go to the Smith and have lunch together. Let's when you were getting into the talent side, right? Because you weren't always in talent, and you were at ESPN, and then you went to CA and started your own thing. I personally really value those relationships and this relationship, because it's not. And I think this is something by the way, this is something I've learned over the years. It's been very hard for me.
Okay.
It's not always trying to get something. It's not always trying to sell something. It is truly about, and I heard Jesse Itzler saying this today on some Instagram thing earlier, like being able to just stay in contact with people and build relationships with people for no other reason than just to check in and say hi, and because you're a friend. Those things usually end to something good. And even if they don't, it doesn't matter. You got a friendship, so it's good anyway. Right. But that's where business is done, with people you like, and you got to start liking people by getting together and having coffee. So
And I feel like I mentioned just before when we met, I was like, I like this guy. When you sit with somebody that excuse my language, you fuck with them. And so I think you and I had decided, regardless if in that one pitch or that one moment, whether we work together, you did such a great job in staying in touch with me. And then I was like, yeah, I want to stay in touch with this guy. And we've kind of both reinvented or pivoted in our lives and careers over the last 15 years. And I think every single time we've updated each other. I think you may have been better at it than me. And I have a lot to learn from you in that way. I've always really respected how well you have kept in touch. And so, yeah, it's fun to be here. It's fun to like reconnect in more unofficial capacity. I'm honored that you gave me a call to join and hop in this Zoom and podcast with you. And congratulations on deciding to, I think I've also done this moment where you're like, God, I have great relationships.
Yeah.
There could be really great conversation that comes from some of these things. And, there's not a lot of people who put those things into action. So congrats. And thank you for having me.
I told you before we hopped on, I love the idea, and I wish I could just listen to other people's conversations. And I think sometimes, like Forge and I always joke around, like, hey, maybe we should just do a podcast, because our conversations are the stupidest fucking things in the world, right? Our arguments are the dumbest arguments, and we literally go on rants. Like, we've had one argument about whether or not you can be French Canadian or not. Can you really be French Canadian, or are you just French living in Canada? It's honestly been an argument for 13 years.
I think it depends on where you're born.
Well, no. He says you cannot be French Canadian. You are either French living in Canada, or you're Canadian and you speak French. I think that's bullshit, because people identify themselves as French Canadian.
Okay, so here's a question: Are you? Am I an Italian American?
That's my whole point.
Am I a European American, as people, through the last few years? I mean, I've learned so much in founding Ally to Action, which was, a nonprofit I created in the wake of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery's murder, and Breonna Taylor, and everything, the horrific happenings in early 2020 that have really kind of opened so many folks up. And I think there was somebody I was in a conversation with, actually, was an old advisor of Bill Clinton's, and, an older Black gentleman who prefers to go by African-American and then European American for anyone who is of the Caucasian complexion, because, white is quite of a blanket statement. And it was fascinating. It was fascinating. I haven't really heard many other people outside of him say that, but I would say French Canadian could be a thing.
I feel like now I just want to be American. Like, I don't know how many generations you have to be
don't
here.
Get me started.
No, but I don't know how many generations you have to live in America to say you're American. If I was living in Italy and somebody said, "What are you?" you would say, "I'm American."
Sure.
But why can't you say that living in America? Like, if you're an Italian, right? If you're in Italy and you were and you say you're Italian, you don't say I'm like French Italian or I'm British.
But if people ask me what my ethnic background is, I say Italian.
Yeah, but how many generations have you been here though?
Two.
So you're really, again, at what point, we all go back to somewhere. It's not the United States, right? We're back to somewhere, and it's probably not even back to Italy. It's probably back further somewhere. So, like, when do you stop doing that? Anyway, that has nothing to do with selling.
Here we go. We're gonna talk about sales.
So let's give me 2 seconds, right? I just want people to understand, like, what Carter Media Group is, what Ally to Action is. Like, give me a quick 2 cents of kind of what you're doing now.
Sure. Look, I came out to LA 8.5 years ago to CAA. To help really start an area of the business in the agency that kind of focused on building the brand narratives of non-scripted talent. and a part of that, I really kind of unearthed and was kind of at the tip of the spear of the democratization of content. So, the emergence in a real way of, Facebook, Instagram, Vine, all of these places where new talent was cropping up and creating audience of their own, right? Historically, media companies, studios, right, have the audience, and then hopefully the talent gets to do a deal with the places who have the audience, and then advertisers get to, hopefully benefit from that a sales capacity, right? It was a system. And it was such a disruption to the system. And so it was really cool to be at CA at that time. I became a founding agent in the digital talent packaging and brand partnerships group, and was lucky enough to learn from really smart people and really kind of just see from a different vantage point how sports, entertainment, right, like in all these other was really shifting. And while I was in there, I was really able to work with some amazing talent. And in a certain place as an agent, you kind of get bogged down in details and weeds. And so, and people are like, you need to sign more talent. You're like, well, I got to like send these emails. So you have to give them to a manager, right? That's kind of, you have to sign them to a management company who handles kind of all of the relational stuff. So an agent can kind of stay more transactional. And long story short, there was a white space in the industry for management companies who truly understood the new creator, the new talent that was cropping up in the spaces. And frankly, also, I think people who knew and understood and focused on BIPOC talent, because traditionally, again, systems are in place that have not been welcoming to, large audiences of people and large groups of talent, namely people of color and women. And so I had a hard time finding my talent management. And that got it, right? That like knew and understood, okay, this is how we can innovate. This is how we can disrupt and not just like plug and play in the system that by the way, plug and play works. The system does work for certain people. And so one of my clients, phenomenal talent by the name of Liza Koshy, she just was like, look, how about you be my manager and producing partner? We were able to figure it out. Took a 60% pay cut,
it's not a small client, by the way, at the time. And she's not, she was a significant personality. And to your point, being one of the beginning, I mean, she went from Vine. She was right?
Only on, she started on Vine. And at that time she was still very young, 18, and didn't know what she didn't know. And, because of my background in sport entertainment and television, I understood the whole landscape and like, okay, we have to approach the entirety and the future of your career, not just from a siloed place. Right. And we need to diversify. And so I had another phenomenal client by the name of Ghetto Gastro. And they said, hey, you're CAA to us. They came. And so I started CMG with two clients, and really with the vision of working with disruptive, innovative, and inclusive talent, right? People who are seeing opportunities and deciding, hey, I want to go in there and I want to do it differently. Right. And with an intention and a purpose. And also to your point about relationships and like getting to work with the people you want to work with. I was like, great, well then we're going to work with the people that I want to work with. Right. And kind of trade on the relationships that I built over the last, at that time, I guess 16 years. And so it's been 5.5 years, which has been amazing. We have 8 very eclectic kinds of talents. But the thing that's a through line is they're all shaping culture or shaping energy in the space in which they are differently. Right. So awesome. Ghetto Gastro and like culinary, right? You have Salema Masakela. Some know him as Sal Masakela, big host of the X Games.
Been around forever. One of the OGs. Around,
he's a legend, but like, he was the only person of color in a very, European American, space of action sports and outside sports. Right. And so he's really just been this voice and this beacon in the last couple of years, as you can imagine. Unfortunately, really, he was reclaimed his name as Salema. And again, we help. I keep going, but I could talk about my clients forever. But essentially, we like to kind of take it all the way down to the sticks, using kind of a building metaphor or analogy, and we say, okay, why are you doing this? And we take all of our clients down to the sticks and say, let's figure out the why first. Right. And once we understand the why, we come in and we consult and advise in building the brand in the spaces that they've traditionally been in, and then help advise and then move forward in new spaces in new ways, again, to innovate and shape. and reach different audiences. And so we work literally the gamut 360 across all areas of business. And, this is a sales podcast, and, people are like, oh, you're in management. I was like, no, what I do is I have the honor of representing the missions, the purposes, the intentions of some really impactful voices in our world. And I sell them every day. I have the honor of representing their stories every day.
So I was going to ask you that because I find, I think most of the people I'm having on this podcast, I would call more traditional salespeople, right? Like
sure.
They've got the NFL to sell. They have
a piece of IP. They have a mark.
Yeah, something, right? You're. I want to say you're more like me, and that what we hold is air, right? Like a human being isn't a widget, and so a human being doesn't cost X, and you sell it for Y. It's not that way at all.
The rate card. Hey, Lottie, give me the rate card. You're like,
it's exactly.
We don't have that.
I'm excited to have you on because you're as much a marketer as you are a salesperson. And in my mind, again, part of the purpose of this podcast is to like demystify what a salesperson looks like, acts like, is, right? Because at the end of the day, but you're what you said before about like shifting culture, and they're culture makers. Just because you're transacting and there's revenue attached to it, right, which is technically a sale, doesn't mean like that's a negative. It's not a negative thing. It always really frustrates me. Like I tell people all the time, like, yes, I'm a manager, but I'm in sales, and I'm the proudest salesperson in the world because at the end of the day, like that's how business operates. Unless you're not.
Also, that's how you pay your bills. You are helping somebody literally live the life they believe they were put on the earth to live.
Which is amazing.
It's such an honor, like the responsibility that lies on me and my employees' shoulders, and like it can be crippling sometimes,
100%.
because when you get that phone call and you're like, here's the deal, so I need a check, or this is happening, and you're like, okay, we gotta make some calls, we gotta do some things, and the money is lumpy. I say sometimes in our business the money can be very lumpy, like it'll come in once a year instead of, unless you kind of are smart enough to figure out payment plans and stuff like that. But usually when people want that lump sum, it's better for taxes and what have you. So
lots of reasons.
Lots of reasons. And so, I do not take it for granted that people trust, CMG to represent not only their reputation and their brand, but it's like their life. It's their livelihood.
Oh my God, hell's yeah. I mean, I feel the same way. Like, listen, when how many of your clients have kids, but when they start having kids, it gets even more real, right? Yeah. Because when you start, like, listen, Forgy owns Son and Sonny, and like I can see, Mark's family, and like I look at Sonny, it's like, listen, my job is not only now for him and his wife Kristen, but it's also for Sonny. Now, I don't do my job, that kid's his life is going to be impacted, right? But if I do my job well, it's impacted in a positive way, right? And so, it's you forget that we deal with people's lives and careers, and they've entrusted us to actually do that. But it makes it that much more rewarding too. Like when it works, it's amazing.
100%. I think it takes an emotional intelligence that I don't think every person has or wants to actually have the responsibility of either. Lonnie, I think you and I we're cut from a very similar cloth. You're very empathetic, but you're also, such a dynamic human that happens to just be a natural salesperson. Like it's just a part of who you are, and it's not disingenuous, right? I think that there are some people who are like, I just want to go to a job. I'm good at selling stuff. I want to sell the stuff and I want to make some money and I want to go home. Like I wake up really jealous of those people sometimes.
So do I. I agree with you. 100%.
And I used to. I mean, for everyone listening, my background is selling intellectual property rights for sports, right? Or media rights, and, driving incremental revenue for, a media company based on creative ideas. And, for me, I really, truly, I think our superpower and my personal superpower is essentially being a transmuter between somebody who has an objective, an audience they want to reach, a message they want to get out there, and then I become a translator into whatever I'm working with or representing, whether that's a league, a person, a trademark, a message, in order to help tell that message through that vehicle. And that is, to me, the fun part. That's the art. right? The marketing, I'm a marketer. I think that's the people are like, oh, you've worked at Nike, right? I'm like, no, I just born and raised in Portland. I know a lot of people who work there. I feel like by way of what we do, we have to become masters of whoever we're trying to translate the message for.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the time I'm like, I may as well have worked at these places,
Yeah.
because it's like, I've got to know it so well in order to tell them what they can't see.
So how do you get to this point, Courtney? Forget like the clients and forget kind of foundations and the actual stuff. How do you like personally? Because the other thing I find really interesting, and what I like to talk to people about, and what I think is helpful for younger kids that are getting into whatever they're doing, is everybody's got a different sales style, right? That took me a really long time to try to figure out, right? Like, there's not one way. There's not one way to close a deal, to talk to people, to engage with an audience, to be in a room, to command a room. Everybody does it differently. Some of the best people I've ever seen, Alan Zucker, I think, is one of the best sales guys I've ever met in my life. He is vastly different than me, right? Yeah. Vastly different than me. So I'm curious, like, how did you figure out, like, and I'm sure you're still figuring it out because I know that I am, right? Mm-hmm. How did you get to here, right? Like, what were kind of some of the things that you challenged yourself professionally, like emotionally, like spiritually? Like, what were some of the steps you took?
That's such a big question.
It is a big question.
Damn. I've done a lot of work in this, not specifically as it pertains to sales, but I think it's like, why do I do what I do? Answering kind of those more like big meta questions. Yep. And it goes down to my childhood. And I started selling things, Lonnie, when I was 4. Okay. So it's definitely just a part of who I am. But the question was why? And I think it's because I always wanted to create things that brought joy or experience to people. And so as an example, like I went to the fair with my dad. I was 4 or 5. And I just remember going through and there were rocks that were painted. And I said, what are those? And my dad said, like, people paint and they put them in their garden. And next thing you know, when we got home, I grabbed all the rocks in our pebble and grabbed my paint and painted rocks. And my parents didn't even know I had left the house and started selling painted rocks door to door.
I love it.
Came back with like $5 or something, right? And
a lot of money back then, 10 years ago.
I mean, inflation, 1985. And then the next thing I did, I went to a Easter Peter Rabbit pancake breakfast or something, and like that my preschool put on, and there were little games, right? The little like hook the fish over, and I just was like, Mom, Dad, why this would be fun? We should make a carnival. So then I started the Carter Carnival in our driveway. It was an annual thing. We made the games. We sold tickets for 10 cents. I've just always been this entrepreneur, which for me was always about unifying people, bringing people to a place to enjoy themselves and each other. And so, and then if you now like fast forward to where I'm at and the things I've done, I've always just, whether that's playing soccer, and I was always kind of the captain, I was always about bringing everyone on the same page, like towards a common goal, right? And so when I look at my style of sales, it's always about, I want to understand why you need to do the thing, why you need to sell the widget, why you need to get the message out. And then since I understand what I represent so well, now it's my turn to tell you a story about how your widget is sold through my vehicle. And that is unification to benefit the whole. And that for me is kind of like how I've always, and I didn't really figure it out until truly this year, Bonnie, that like it went all the way back to when I was a kid. And that was all very subconscious, right? Like I wasn't like, oh, I want to bring people together. That wasn't, it was very subconscious. And so, but now, in the beautiful age of 40, you get to this age and you go, okay, what and why am I doing what I'm doing?
Yeah.
And I'm very lucky to have had parents who were really supportive of my crazy, fun entrepreneurial ideas. And, they also sold things over the years, whether that was Amway or, my mom sold Doncaster, which was like a in-home women's brand. And, my dad was always, kind of on the sales side of title insurance and escrow. And so, I say all of that to say my style is very not about selling the thing. It's about telling the story correctly. And if I don't
understand before you want to be understood.
100%. Ooh, yeah. I'm gonna steal that. Yeah.
I don't think that was mine. I think somebody else definitely said that.
Yeah. So we're gonna, we can font underneath who said that. But yeah, I just that part, and then that's the fun part too. I always used to say when I was at Some, it was like, we were so lean back in the day, from cold call to like close. My favorite part of the business or that journey was like, if this is A and this is Z, I really loved like H through R, which was the creative part, which was like meeting, understanding the marketing objectives, really then kind of getting creative and creating things that hadn't ever been done before to then do it and then making it happen. Right. The cold calling wasn't my favorite, and neither was the contract stuff.
Right. So let me, as an entrepreneur, but by the way, I just want to let you know, I hate that word. And here's why. This is why I hate the word. I hate the word because it's got a sexy connotation to it, right? Like people think you're an entrepreneur and you're like the reality, you're like a fancy tech person that's got that flying on a private jet. The reality is like being an entrepreneur sucks 85% of the time. Right. Because and the reason I thought about this, I started this company, We Feast, like 2.5 years ago. And I was sitting inside a cooler in Pat LaFreda's butcher. He owns like a 10,000 square. It was 32 degrees in there. And I'm on my hands and knees packing boxes. And I went outside and somebody's like, yeah, you're an entrepreneur. I was like, fucking entrepreneur. I was like, I have a hat on with a whatever. I got something covered in my beard. I'm freezing. I was like, this is not a sexy thing. So anyway, I use the word entrepreneur, but it's like the vast majority of being an entrepreneur is like stressful and painful and rewarding. But it's like in the media, the word entrepreneur gets thrown around. Needless to say, you're an entrepreneur, right?
And there's different levels of entrepreneurship too. So I feel like, of course. Sorry, go with your question.
But my question is, how do you balance, because you're a small business, I'm a small business, right? We're not the NFL, we're not Some, we're not... How do you balance everything that you just said, right? About the way you envision selling, the way that you like the why with transactions and revenue? Because sometimes you need, at least from my experience, you need to just fucking transact and make some money.
Volume.
And clients demand it too. Like, hey, I love the why. We got the why set. I need you to now go close some damn deals for me. Like, how do you balance that?
That's hard. I don't think that it's a mathematical equation. I think that, I think the market has moments. And I think that, truly understanding how the market moves and the timelines in which they move and being able to get ahead of it and forecast, okay, I know that my client's going to drop a book on this date. Okay, how long do I know a marketer needs to make a decision for a budget in order to make something like that happen? And so you have to be strategic. I think without strategy, you can get lucky, but I think luck, money doesn't, I say manna from heaven. Sometimes those deals that just like the calls you get and you're like, this is manna from heaven. This is just bread.
I love those
right?
So much sometimes.
Those, they're the best. They're the best calls, but they don't happen very often.
Right. Right.
So, I think for me, the funnel has to be there. And, I think to your point about being a small, business entrepreneur, you've got to be out in the world. And, I know for the last couple of years that's been difficult. But you got to be out with the people. You have to re-engage with the relationships. And to your point, they may not always be a deal, but you never know where that person is going to be next. And they might be representing the brand or the business that might be the perfect thing for, what you're selling, to just be blunt about it. And you can get right to the point, right? I think that's the other thing is when you get to a certain level, you don't have to like pussyfoot around it. It's like, hey, Lonnie, here's a deal. I got a thing. Here's what it is. Yeah. Is there any interest? And the one thing I'm so grateful for New York, because, I'm from Oregon, born and raised, and I never really felt like I fit. But when I got to New York City, I was like, these are my people,
The
right?
speed. Yeah.
The speed and but also the transparency. So the speed and the honesty.
The bluntness.
I don't have time. I don't want to waste your time.
Right.
I don't need you to waste my time. There's definitely the niceties that happen, the relational stuff. But at a certain point, it's like, hey, I know your time is money. My time is also that. So let's just like stop beating around the bush and get there. Right.
Yeah.
And so now I can be very clear at the start of a relationship. Hey, I'm going to tell you about our clients. I'm going to tell you about who we are and what we do. If there's something to do together, let's keep talking. If there's not, let's keep in touch.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think time is so important, and you know, families, and it's one thing that I think people do forget. But yeah, volume and deal making is I wish it was more of a science than an art, but I think it is very much of an art. And you know, I think then you're talking about employees and someone who's going to stay on top of those relationships if it's not you. And I think that's where I have a hard time is I've got to run my business. I've got to manage my employees. I want to see them grow because it's important for me that they grow in their career. But like my LinkedIn sits, I'm not on that like I need to be.
Yeah.
I'm gonna raise my hand and say like, there's amazing people that I wish I got to talk to every day. That, you know, I've had the honor of like working with or around, and, you know, Women in Sports and Events is such an amazing organization that I was involved in. That's how I know Rini really, you know, and it's like engaging with people. I think in COVID and pandemic, I got to re-engage with a lot of people because people were seeking that reconnection. And, you know, there's just not enough time in the day. Right. I wish I had another me that was just staying in contact with like all of the people.
Yeah. So
let's make a software. Let's make a software, Lonnie.
So this is what Jesse Itzler said today on I don't know if you follow him or know who he is. The guy's
who is he?
Jesse Itzler. He started he was a white rapper and he wrote the Go New York, Go song for,
of course.
And then
I was there.
He almost did it for almost every single team. Every single team. He partnered with Kenny Dichter. They started Alphabet City. He sold it to SFX. Then he started Marquee Jet. And his wife, by the way, also started Spanx. Right. So
yes. I totally know. Got it. Yes.
He's amazing.
Together.
He's amazing. Yeah. So if you follow him on Instagram, the guy's an awesome follow. And I saw him today, and he was like, I've got a top 50 people that can move the needle in my life one way or another. And my job is to maintain contact with them, not just pinging them to stay relevant. And it's like, hey, how's your day going? I just popped up in your mind, was just thinking about you. How's your family? Happy birthday, for no other reason, just to stay relevant, because
connection.
I've always found, and the reason why I ping people all the time is really for that, right? Is because the universe works in a mysterious ways, right? It's no accident that when you think about somebody, you get a phone call like that. It happens way too often to be an accident. It really does, in my mind. So when you stay relevant and you stay in contact with people, you just never know when they're thinking about something that you potentially could be a solution for, or you can help. But that really does go back to these relationships, right? And foundationally, my issue with transactions, like I'm still cold calling, partly because I like it. I kind of like cold calling and cold emailing and trying to unearth opportunities that weren't there before.
Hunt and gather.
I get jazzed out of it. Yeah. But I really dig staying in touch with people, and I really dig those phone calls that you get where you're like, dude, I'm so glad we connected last month, or reconnected last month. We grabbed drinks. Happens to be a deal that's coming across my table that may make sense for one of your people. I love that because I did my job over 15 years. And Courtney, I know you know this better than anybody. I think about my clients and I think about deals that we do, and they always seem easy to people. They always seem like, oh shit, that was an easy deal. That was an easy deal. I know, and I'll use an example. American Cut was a deal that I brought to Mark Forgione, 10 years ago. The reason why we got that deal is because I stayed in touch with a guy named Joe Favorito. Joe Favorito put me in touch with
Joe
a guy named
Fav.
Jeff, right? So Joe, when I started my company, put me in touch with a guy named Jeff who owned a place called the Superdome. Superdome, he hadn't asked me to sit on the board of his foundation, which a guy named Mike Brown sat on the board with. Mike Brown introduced me to a guy named Cheryl Penny. Cheryl Penny introduced me to a guy that we ended up doing the deal with. It took me 15 years to do that deal. It seemed like it took a month.
Yeah.
Like literally. And that to me is really like, that is sales in every ounce of the way. It's like 15 years ago, I built a relationship and I maintained it. And that's why we got that deal today.
I mean, truer words have never been spoken. And I think I think an analogy in Hollywood that's used a lot is like, no one becomes, very rarely is someone an overnight success.
100%.
Right. They've been slogging it out. You know what I mean? And it just so happens that one thing hits, and then you're prepared because you put in the work, and you've been on the sets, or you've had the reps, and athletes, I think sports is a little different, but 100%. You just do not know. I think the one thing that I don't like, this came up yesterday. I had a deal that I woke up to an email that was very concerning and frustrating, right? When you've been very clear about something, deal terms are already figured out, but then it's like the execution stuff, and people are dropping balls because I think where things can get hairy in execution is when there's too many agencies involved, and agencies are really trying to hold information from clients in order to package it in this like pretty box.
Right.
And so long story short, there was a situation where that happened. And obviously, there were some balls dropped that I was like, look, I'm sorry. That seems like a you problem, not a me problem. And for legal reasons, I need to cover my bases here. And we may need to negotiate a kill fee and just not have this happen. Just move on. It's not meant to be. It's not meant to be. I think that's the other thing, Lonnie, that I've learned over time. It was really hard for me to learn. Do not try to force something that's not supposed to be.
I agree.
And I think as a salesperson, we're always trained, or it's just inside of us to be like, don't lose, get the deal, always be closing, always be closing. It's going to go. It's going to go. Sometimes the smartest thing to do is just be like, I'm going to release it.
No, it's the most powerful word in the dictionary. No.
I'm going to release it. And because guess what? The money's going to come. I think that's the other thing is like the money will come if you're going in with the right intentions, and you're going in with the right intentions and with integrity. It'll be all right. It might hurt sometimes. You know what I mean?
This question may lead really well into that. Like I try to ask everybody that on these podcasts, like, what was like what you think the biggest or one of the biggest mistakes that you made, and like what did you learn from it? I have so many, it's crazy, right? Like big mistakes that like in the moment I thought was literally going to destroy me. And then when I look back, I think, man, that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me in some ways. Mm-hmm. You have any of those?
I mean, sure, of course. I think if I'm to like think of something specifically, I think
it doesn't necessarily have to be a mistake, or maybe just a lesson learned from something that you did.
I think to your point, it's when I try to hold on to something too closely. I try to control it too much. It can't be controlled. If it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be, and let it go. Right. I think the other thing is I'd like to say over my life, personally and professionally, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? And so to listen at least twice as much as you speak, to really truly understand who you're with and what. And I think through therapy and a lot of things that I've learned, going through life is to show up first with curiosity.
I love that.
And not have curiosity be like 3rd or 4th on the list.
Yeah, I love that. It's true.
And so I'd say that, because every time I'd show and I'd be like, okay, I gotta get the meeting, or I've got to, like the first thing was that. And it comes through, it can be very aggressive. You know what I mean? Like even the energy, my energy alone, I know I've learned also over time can be very, very strong, to use a simple word. But if I enter a room, if I enter a phone call, if I enter a conversation with a curious spirit, and then an intention to listen,
Yeah.
that is always going to be a more beneficial conversation or experience than otherwise would have been. And when I was younger, I mean, even a year ago, maybe not, right? So I think that that's something that has really started to serve me in a way. And then also just this like relieve stress, like,
Yeah.
that is not helpful to anyone.
It's funny you say that. I've been thinking a lot lately about, by nature, like the tone of my voice, the way that I speak comes
Yeah.
off as aggressive, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Comes off as like whatever, salesy in some ways, right? And
Sure.
people that don't know me, whatever, right? And so I often think about like how do I dial that back? And more lately, I've actually come to the conclusion like, why dial it back when that's actually who I am? Right? Like the reality is like if you can't deal with it, that's not really my issue. That's a you issue. And so it's not necessarily, again, I think there's always moments and there's always rooms
Sure.
that you've got to read and to step back and say, like, now is not the time to be super aggressive, or maybe I need to dial back my tone, depending on who I'm talking to, whatever it may be.
Sure.
But generally speaking, I think figuring out your authentic you, whatever that
Yep.
may be. And if
Sure.
that's aggressive, it's aggressive. If it's soft, it's soft. Like I find like that's where you become the best version of yourself, is when you can just be okay being you and not trying to be something else. Like the beginning of my career, I used to sit in rooms and be like, if I could just do that, or if I could just sell like that, or if I could just be the cool guy in the room that like made the joke and went golfing. Like I'm never going to be I'm never going to be 6'3", and I'm never going to be the best looking guy in the room, and I'm never going to be the best dressed guy in the room. Like that's just not me.
I will say I'm liking the beard with the hair. I like this look.
It's been a
Just
while.
so you know.
Thank you. But you know what I mean?
You guys, when I
And
met
like,
Lonnie, you had a full head of hair.
yeah, no, I haven't had a full head of hair in years. I just actually decided to shave it a couple of years ago.
I like
But
it.
I think being comfortable in what you are and being okay with it. And by the way, I'm still not, and I'm still learning that. And that is an evolution. And it's like, I always think like first one was just like recognizing it and then trying to figure out how it kind of plays. You know, it's hard.
It is. And I think in what I do and what we do, it can be difficult. You know, we tend to be quite 360 in the people we work with.
Yeah.
And when you try to be everything to someone, you can lose why they work with you in the first place, or what's your superpower in the equation, in the relationship, right? You kind of lose the plot a little bit, and what your character is in the story, if you're trying to like play all the roles.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most recent thing that I've learned is like, you don't have to be everything to everyone. I need to focus on what and how do I continue to be the one who's differentiating, and to double down on that.
Yeah.
And be okay if that's a shift in the business model, right?
Which
be okay. It's just hard, you know, and be okay if it feels uncomfortable for a minute, you know. And I think it all does go back down to really giving yourself time, energy, and space to like know what your thing is, what your superpower is. And, you know, big hats off to Jay Shetty, who's a dear friend.
I love his stuff, by the way. He's great online. His content's great.
He's phenomenal. And, you know, we're speaking about, you know, something happens overnight, man, that guy is making videos that nobody watched for years and years and years. You know, when he left, you know, the monk life, like he talked to rooms with no people in it, you know, just to get the rep in when no one would show up. Right. And his heart is so good. And when he first went to LA, I was one of the first people he met, and, you know, we just became friends. And, you know, for about 4 years. And then it was like, hey, maybe should we work together? Should we not? And, you know, it was like, you know, let's try it. And if it doesn't work, let's make sure we get out of it. Right. Because our friendship matters too much to us. And, you know, ultimately we worked together for a little bit under a year. And I'll never forget a conversation we had, which he kind of brought up, you know, like, what he saw as, my superpower, and like kind of challenging me with my superpower. And it really was a moment in my life, right? It was a bit of a mirror moment with somebody I highly respect, who I love, and care for. And I was disappointing. I was, and that hurts, when you work with somebody and they're like, well, I'm just disappointed, the D word, in this thing. And you go, okay, all right, well, maybe I didn't, do that thing, in the way that there was maybe an expectation. And how do I get around that? And how do I double down on the superpower? And so, to be honest, the top of the year, I said, this is what I'm going to do for myself. Every quarter, I'm going to go away. I'm going to take myself away for 2 nights, from my house. I'm going to go to Malibu, or nothing, not like flying anywhere. But I'm going to have an offsite with myself every quarter.
I love that.
And I'm going to recalibrate and ensure that I am on the track that I've committed that I would be on, right? Because in what we do, and it can be fast, and we're flying here and we're doing that, we're talking to these people, and you kind of just get on that hamster wheel and you forget why you're on it sometimes.
I agree.
And so I've had 2 of these, in the past 6-7 months, and they have been highly effective for me personally. To just be like, straight wins the race type of, to use a biblical, metaphor and analogy. But I think that's the other thing that I've learned, which is like, don't forget your superpower once you've identified it, and lean into that, and the other stuff, hire out.
which is not easy, by the way.
No, especially when you're a small business and you don't have cash. But and if you don't hire out, then figure out how to change your business that makes sense for what you do. And I think that's, always trying to stay ahead of the curve is where I try to be. And with everything moving so quickly, you were asking me, like, do I call you a marketer? Do I call you a management company? Like, it's a media company? And I'm like, they're all the same thing to me. They're all the same thing. We're all just trying to tell a story and drive revenue, and tell a story and drive revenue, so we can pay our bills, to tell more stories, to go on holiday once a year, and love the people, to love and be loved. Like, period, end of story. It's a means to an end, but I feel also really lucky to do what I do. Like, people are like, oh, like, how's your balance? And I'm like, I love what I do, because what I do is what I love. And yes, do I want to like have peace and go for a walk on the beach and not think about anything but God and myself? Yes, 100%. It's
not reality though most of the time.
It's not reality most of the time. And I have created a business and work with people that I consider my family. And to be honest, they all love and support each other too. And that's really cool, Lonnie. Like, every once in a while, I have every client in the same town at the same time. We've done it twice in 5.5 years. And most recently we did, I got a box at a Clipper game, and everybody came out.
Amazing.
And it was so great. You know what I mean? It was just like, brought their kids, and we were just able to like be in community with each other. And that's the important stuff.
I agree. Well, listen, I'm running out of time. You're running out of time. I could talk to you for hours. I love your chi. I love the way that you look at life. I love the way that you operate your business. I'm appreciative for your friendship, for sure, Courtney. And I'm appreciative you coming on this with me right now. I really am.
This was a blast. It went way too fast. Yeah. You're hitting LA soon, so please, let's grab some grub, some cocktails, all the things.
I'll shoot you a separate email. We'll make sure to get together then.
All right. Congratulations on all, and thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Courtney. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.